Examination of his skull in 1910 showed it had been cloven with some hard instrument, possibly a knife or an axe. It's virtually certain that Henry VI was murdered to get him out of the way.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're exploring the most infamous times people who were arrested or sentenced to jail were seemingly murdered suspiciously. We'll examine incidents where the case is formally unsolved, and those where severe doubts about the official cause exist.
Salvo was stabbed to death in prison. No one was ever convicted in his death.
Tanisha Chappelle.
Family, friends, and supporters of Tanisha Chappelle gathered with one goal.
Tanisha Chappelle!
To call for answers in the 23-year-old's death.
Stop killing us!
In 2021, Chappelle was pulled over in Brownstown, Indiana on suspicion of theft. After briefly trying to escape, she was charged on multiple counts. Unable to afford bail, Chappelle had to remain in the small local jail until her trial. During that time, as the only Black woman in her unit, she was racially abused by other inmates. About 2 months after her arrest, Chappelle complained about feeling unwell and began vomiting. However, the staff didn't take her plea seriously as her condition rapidly deteriorated.
Chappelle tells jail staff, "I need to go to the hospital 6 times, and that she needs help 14 times.
Eventually, they called for an ambulance. However, shortly after arriving at the hospital, she passed away. The autopsy showed she died from, quote, toxicity from an unknown substance, with many believing inmates poisoned her. Her family is still looking for answers.
Jackson County Jail and any other participants in my sister's death must face charges.
The Duluth Tragedy.
Lynchings weren't about justice or even revenge, they were about fear and control.
James Sullivan claimed 6 Black circus workers visiting Duluth, Minnesota had attacked him and assaulted his partner, Irene Tuscan. However, a doctor couldn't find evidence of the attack on her. Regardless, the police arrested the accused men. With rumors and a media storm engulfing the white community, a mob of up to 10,000 men went to the jail. They forced their way in and took the suspects.
No power to do anything against this mob.
The unhinged group convicted Elias Clayton, Elmer Jackson, and Isaac McGee and brutally killed them. Yet no one from the mob was convicted for the murders. Max Mason, one of the suspects, was sentenced to 30 years for the supposed assault on Tuscan. In 2020, he was pardoned posthumously, a first for Minnesota.
We will never know the destinies and legacies that these men would have chosen for themselves had they been allowed to make that choice.
Gunvar Galtung Hovig. While working as a Norwegian nurse during World War II, Hovig fell in love with Vladimir Kozlov, a Russian prisoner of war. This led to her working for the Norwegian embassy in Moscow, Russia. However, the KGB saw the opportunity to threaten the well-being of Kozlov and force Hovig to spy for them. She did for over 27 years, even upon returning to her home country to work at the Foreign Ministry. In 1977, Hovig was exposed by KGB double agent Oleg Gordievsky and was arrested. She immediately confessed. However, before she went to trial, Hovig passed away. According to Norwegian sources, it was reportedly due to a cardiac event. Yet others speculate something more sinister and mysterious was involved. Lee Bradley Brown.
5 News understands that a British man who died in custody in Dubai was beaten so badly by police there he couldn't stand up.
While on vacation in Dubai in 2011, Lee was arrested after apparently getting very violent with a hotel housekeeper. After visiting the prosecutor's office, Lee returned badly beaten. Dubai officials first claimed his cellmates did it, then said the Englishman did it to himself.
British officials tried to visit him but were turned away. He was never released.
They stated they had CCTV footage that in theory could have proven their claims, but none was released or given to the UK authorities. Lee's condition deteriorated, and he passed away 6 days after his arrest. UAE's post-mortem examination concluded he had died from choking on vomit. However, the UK found no evidence of this during their investigation. During an inquest in 2022, there were reports that the Dubai guards bragged about attacking Lee, which was denied by officials.
According to local newspaper reports, Dubai police claim Lee had no bruises or marks that would suggest he'd been assaulted.
Fernando Alban.
Wrapped in Venezuela's red, blue, and yellow flag, the coffin of Fernando Alban rests in the capital, Caracas.
In 2018, Alban, of the Justice First opposition party in Venezuela, was arrested for an unknown reason. He was taken to the Bolivarian Intelligence Service headquarters in Caracas, Venezuela. Within days, officials claimed he had purposely jumped from the building, ending his life. Later, Officials stated he was initially arrested for conspiracy to assassinate President Nicolás Maduro.
Alban was among at least 24 people arrested in connection with the incident involving 2 drones.
Rumors and conflicting evidence suggested that Alban had already died before he was thrown from the building.
In addition to the economic and social tragedy that the vast majority of Venezuelans are going through, look at where we are now, mourning a colleague who was thrown from the 10th floor of the police building.
In 2021, the Attorney General admitted the victim hadn't taken his own life. 2 officers were leniently sentenced. However, Alban's family claimed neither were charged with his intentional murder, only neglect, and were barely imprisoned. The family did, however, win a lawsuit against the Cartel of the Suns. Alexei Navalny.
Russian President Vladimir Putin's fiercest and most energetic critic dropped dead suddenly at a penal colony in Siberia.
For years, Navalny had been one of the most prominent opponents of Vladimir Putin's reign in Russia, which had seemingly resulted in several stints in jail. In 2020, he was hospitalized from a nerve agent and, upon his recovery, blamed Putin. In 2021, after going back to Russia from Germany following treatment, Navalny was arrested for apparently violating parole. Over the years, he was sentenced to prison for various periods on several charges.
This is the 5th criminal trial where he's been found guilty, all of which are seen as attempts to silence one of Putin's most vocal political opponents.
In 2023, Navalny seemingly vanished, only to turn up in a corrective colony in the Arctic Circle 3 weeks later. In early 2024, it was announced that Navalny had died. The cause is unclear, with officials notably suggesting a blood clot or sudden death syndrome. However, these are disputed.
Navalny's wife, Yulia, in Munich, called for President Putin to be punished. We should come together and fight against this evil, she said.
Otto Warmbier.
He was a promising young student at an elite American university who was arrested in North Korea.
A student at the University of Virginia, Warmbier went to North Korea for a New Year's trip in 2015. In early 2016, as he was gearing up to leave at the airport, Warmbier was arrested on charges of stealing a propaganda poster.
The allegations for which this individual was arrested and imprisoned would not give rise to arrest or imprisonment in the United States or in just about any other country in the world.
His sentence was, quote, 15 years of hard labor. The next year, North Korea released Warmbier following negotiations with the U.S. However, he was in a vegetative state they claimed was triggered by botulism and a sleeping pill. U.S. specialists didn't see any evidence of the former and didn't know what exactly caused his condition. Shortly after his return to America, Warmbier passed away at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center.
The last video his family has of Warmbier as a free man shows their bright, adventurous son playing with children in North Korea days before he was arrested.
Henry VI of England.
A man so feeble-minded and vacuous, he allows a wound to open in his country that takes half a century to heal.
Due to his ineffective leadership and declining mental health, Henry played a key role in the War of the Roses, where the Lancasters and Tudors battled for the English throne against the Yorks. In 1461, he was deposed by York's Edward IV, but regained power briefly in 1470 before losing it again the following year. At this point, Henry was a prisoner in the Tower of London. One biased account claimed, quote, melancholy was the cause of death. However, there were rumors something more nefarious had occurred, that Edward was responsible for Henry's murder. In 1910, they dug up Henry's body, with the evidence confirming his end was brutal.
Examination of his skull in 1910 showed it had been cloven with some hard instrument, possibly a knife or an axe. It's virtually certain that Henry VI was murdered to get him out of the way.
Thor Christensen.
Thor Christiansen terrified a town.
No conscience whatsoever. Zero.
Having moved to the U.S. from Denmark as a child, Christensen's life took a turn in 1976. That year, he began picking up young women hitchhikers in California, ending the lives of 4. Each of his victims looked similar, so he was called the hitchhiker slayer or the look-alike murderer. However, in 1979, he met his match when an injured Lydia Preston escaped. When she saw Christensen in a bar 2 months later, she called the police, leading to his arrest. In 1980, he was found guilty in 2 trials for the 4 slayings and 1 attempted murder, receiving life imprisonment.
This guy thinks what he did was all right.
Not even a full year into his sentence, Christensen was fatally stabbed by an unidentified inmate. Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Albert DeSalvo. In the early 60s, Boston was in fear.
They were young and old, black and white. As the number of victims grew, police became more and more frustrated.
Not only was an assaulter known as the Green Man running rampant, but there was also the Boston Strangler serial killer, who took 13 lives. However, an inmate claimed Albert DeSalvo confessed to the slayings after being arrested for the assaults. While there was no physical evidence, DeSalvo admitted his guilt to the authorities.
The grisly headline-grabbing crimes had some comparing the Boston Strangler to Jack the Ripper.
In 1967, he received life imprisonment. In 1973, DeSalvo was fatally stabbed while in prison. Inmate Robert Wilson was tried for the murder, but it ended in a hung jury, leaving the case unsolved. Due to retracting his confession, there were doubts about DeSalvo's guilt. However, in 2013, his DNA was found on Boston Strangler victim Mary Ann Sullivan.
She is regarded as the 11th of his victims. Other family members of other potential victims of DeSalvo have called on police to try to resolve their cases in a similar fashion.
What's the most famous case of a suspect being killed before they face trial? Let us know below.
Ruby, a well-known police character, burst from the crowd of newsmen and policemen and fired a single bullet at point-blank range into Oswald.